is called the Bourbon Chocolate Lager. This is our winter seasonal is the chocolate lager, which is a 6.5% big, roasty, toasty lager. We don't actually add any chocolate to it. It's just the malts that we use, combination of malts that we use instead of being the caramely toffee kind of idea. We use dark roasted malts to give you kind of a coffee, chocolatey flavor. We did that. We had some kegs of that left over at the end of the season. My assistant brewer was up in Maine. He called me and said, hey, he's from Maine. He was up there over the holidays. They said, there's some guys selling bourbon barrels. You want to buy some? They're still wet. Yeah, load up your truck. We brought back 4 bourbon barrels, and we opened them up, and some of them still had bourbon in it, a little bit, so we emptied out. We got about a gallon of single-strength bourbon out of it. Left that aside for us to have on those extra cold winter days. Didn't have a lot of cold winter days this last winter, but we did go through all the bourbon. And then we took the rest of the chocolate lager that we had sitting around and put it into one of the bourbon barrels and aged that for about 6 weeks. And then pulled that out, and what you wind up getting out of that was, well, you kind of get it, bourbon, and whatever else happened to be kicking around the bourbon barrel at the time, all kinds of interesting, round, ovoid creatures, and it's just this really interesting sour bourbon, vanilla, chocolate, lager kind of thing.
This is a 3-year-old Gouda.
That is good.
This is crunchy, rich, caramelly, sweet, full, serious business.
And it has to be in order to stand up.
It's really to stand up with anything aged in a bourbon barrel, especially to stand up with the bourbon barrel chocolate, because there's so much going on. There's like nutty roasty chocolate, and then there's bourbon, and then there's this sour thing, but then it's just like sour, dry, choke cocoa chocolate, bourbony thing. It's like a mixed drink. It's ridiculous. It's like it's so much going on in there. It's really outstanding. Now against the crunch, the Gouda's crunchy and toffee, butterscotchy, caramel. It's just a serious pairing. I wouldn't give this to my parents. It might scare them, but I would give this to some of my friends. This is very tasty. Now the reason why we did it is I like the bourbon flavors, and I think the fat from the Gouda really mellowed the bourbon on the finish. You got that big bourbon up front, and the fat from the Gouda kind of tamed it out. The sweetness from the cheese, that caramel kind of flavor, pushed a lot of those nutty roasty malts right up to the front there, and then the sourness, the fat mellowed the bourbon, but the sourness cut the fat and the cheese. So it's there's just a whole lot of stuff going on there.
That's one of the things about the bourbon chocolate lager is that the chocolate lager itself is very good.
It was good. I think overall my favorite is the bourbon chocolate. I love those kind of beers that are just kind of out of the norm. A lot of the nut browns and a lot of the pilsners tend to be very similar to other brands, but the bourbon, incredible. The cheeses were wonderful too. Very good.
We've been doing those tastings since we began to get the message across. In Europe, this is not a surprising combination, but in the United States, there was a mindset that said, oh, wine and cheese. But actually, beer and cheese is easier. Beer is easier to pair with cheese than wine. There's a larger range of flavors in beer, and it's less acidic.
In summary, to answer your question, why do I think the beer is better paired with food? Because I think the beer is infinitely more complex than wine. Not just because you're not just dealing with a varietal or two. Some wines they blend. Ooh, they got 2 different types of grapes, maybe 3. Ooh, I'm sorry. We got dozens of different types of malts, and they're all roasted a little bit differently. We got the hops. We got the local water that adds an interesting character to the thing. Then we got the yeast that we use and the fermentation character. If you want to talk about aging it in wood, I age beer in wood. That's easy. Anybody can age it in wood. The hard part is getting it to be where you want it to be before you put it in the wood. That's not whether a beer would go well with this meal, it's which beer would go well with this meal. And there's just some things that wine doesn't go with, I guess.